Welcome to Anti-Aging Insights, where age is a state of mind and aging is a treatable condition. And now, here is your host, Dr. Teri Fisher.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. We are diving into an essential topic when it comes to our skin today, and that is all about sunscreen. Yes, we are going to bask in the sunshine in a safe way, and we're going to explore the world of sunscreen and why it is so important that we do not take this for granted. Let's start off with understanding a little bit about ultraviolet radiation and why we want to do everything we can to avoid exposure to it. As you may know, there are a couple of different types of ultraviolet radiation, UVA, UVB, and UVC. The two really critical ones for us are UVA and UVB. A little way that you can remember this is that UVA, the A, often is seen as the type of radiation that causes aging in our skin. UVB is often seen as the type that causes burning of our skin. Now, there is some overlap, but generally speaking, UVA causes the aging because it penetrates deep into the skin and it causes the signs of aging. It causes wrinkles. It can also contribute to skin cancer. B tends to affect the outer layer of the skin and is the main cause of sunburn, as I said, but it also can play a significant role in skin cancer. UVC, fortunately, is absorbed by the Earth's atmosphere and it doesn't reach the surface, so we don't need to worry too much about that one in terms of sunscreen. There are other reasons to be worried about UVC, but when it comes to skin, fortunately, the atmosphere does a good job of protecting us from that. So, how do we protect ourselves from the UV radiation? Well, the key way that we do this is through sunscreen. And there are two main types of sunscreen. There's physical or mineral sunscreens, and then there are chemical sunscreens. The physical or mineral sunscreens have ingredients like zinc oxide or titanium dioxide, and they work by sitting on top of the skin and physically deflecting UV rays. You can really think of them as a shield for your skin. You are painting on a shield when you apply that sunscreen. One advantage of this type of sunscreen is that it works immediately upon application. You paint it on and it's there and it starts working. They're less likely to cause irritation, and they tend to be really good for more sensitive skin because of that. The downside is that they sometimes can appear white or pasty on the skin, and if that is something that bothers you, then you may not like that type of sunscreen as much. Although, I will say there are newer formulations that have addressed this issue somewhat. Now, when it comes to the other type, chemical sunscreens, these are organic compounds. Some of the more common compounds are oxybenzone, avobenzone, and there are others as well. And they work by absorbing the UV rays and then transforming them into heat and releasing them from the skin. They tend to be easier to rub into the skin, and they tend not to leave that white residue that you see with the other type, and that makes them generally more aesthetically pleasing. However, here's the key and here's the downside. They need to be applied about 15 to 30 minutes to become effective after the application, meaning you have to put them on in advance of actually being in the sun, or they're not going to be working as well for those first 15 to 30 minutes. They can be a little bit irritating to some people, particularly those that have sensitive skin or allergies, so that's something to be aware of as well. So those are the two main types. Now, what are some of the other things that you need to consider when choosing your type of sunscreen? Well, you want broad spectrum protection. What that means is you want a sunscreen that protects against both UVA and UVB rays. That's really crucial for comprehensive protection. SPF, sun protection factor, is a very common marketing tool in addition to having some real scientific data behind it. It measures how well the sunscreen protects against UVB rays. An SPF of 30 is generally recommended for everyday use, and that blocks about 97% of the UVB rays. Higher SPFs can offer more protection, but there's no sunscreen that can block 100% of the radiation. Remember that SPF does not measure UVA protection, so again, you need to look for something that says broad spectrum. Something else to consider is if you're going in the water, you want to have a sunscreen that is water resistant. These will typically last about 40 to 80 minutes before you need to reapply. So that brings us to the next topic. How often do you apply this and how do you apply it? Well, having the right type of sunscreen is the first step. But if you don't have the proper application, then what's the point? You need to apply it generously and evenly. And the fact is, most people don't actually apply enough sunscreen. You need about 1 ounce to cover your entire body. And you think about that, 1 ounce is like a shot glass. So that's a fair bit to cover your entire body. Don't forget the often missed areas, things like your ears, the back of the neck, and even the top of your feet and the backs of your hands. Reapply it often, at least every 2 hours or more frequently if you're swimming or sweating a lot. And don't rely only on the sunscreen. You can use other protective measures as well. Well, staying out of the sun is one option, although I admit it's hard to do that in the summer and we want to be outside. So when you are outside, in addition to the sunscreen, wear protective clothing, wear wide-brimmed hats, wear sunglasses to protect your eyes as well, and seek shade specifically during those really intense hours between, let's say, 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. The other thing to keep in mind is that sunscreen can lose its effectiveness over time. And so you need to check the expiration date and store it in a cool place. And then if in doubt, make sure that you are replacing it. So that's some of the key information about the sunscreen. What about some common myths or misconceptions? Well, here's one myth. I don't need sunscreen on cloudy days. Well, that's false. Up to 80% of UV rays can penetrate through clouds, and sunscreen is necessary regardless of the weather. Here in Vancouver, we do get a lot of cloudy days, particularly in the fall, winter, even in the spring. And so it's really important to wear sunscreen year-round every day. Another myth, people with darker skin don't need sunscreen. While darker skin does have more melanin that provides some natural protection, it's still susceptible to damage from the UV radiation. So regardless of skin tone, everyone should be using sunscreen. Another myth, sunscreen is toxic and dangerous. The truth is, both the United States and Canada have gone through multiple tests to ensure that sunscreens are safe when used as directed. Physical sunscreens are great options if you want to avoid the chemicals that are in the chemical type of sunscreen. And finally, one more myth. A base tan will protect me. This is false. Any tan is a sign of skin damage, and it offers minimal protection against UV radiation. Using sunscreen is far more effective and safer. What about ages now? Who should be using sunscreen? Well, for infants under 6 months, it's best to keep them out of direct sunlight altogether. Use protective clothing, use hats. If shading isn't possible, use a minimal amount of sunscreen on small areas that are going to be exposed to the sun. For children over 6 months, use that broad spectrum SPF 30 or higher sunscreen and opt for physical sunscreens because they are less likely to cause skin irritation. For teenagers and adults, we want everybody to be using daily sunscreen, especially for teens who are often outdoors and want to protect their skin against that aging, that premature aging that can come with long exposure to sun over years. I admit it's hard to have young people, teenagers, realize that this is such an important at this stage of their lives. But the reality is, the better they are protecting it earlier on, the less likely they are to have more severe signs of aging due to the sun. Of course, for adults, a regular use of sunscreen is crucial to prevent premature aging as well and reduce the risk of skin cancer. For seniors, skin becomes thinner with age, making it more susceptible to the UV damage. And so it's important to ensure that older adults are using broad spectrum SPF 30 or higher and reapplying it regularly. And finally, let's just chat about some exciting innovations that we are finding in the market, and they're continuing to evolve. One of these is antioxidant-infused sunscreens. Some sunscreens contain antioxidants that can help to further protect the skin from environmental damage. We are seeing tinted sunscreens, so these not only offer protection, but help to even out skin tone and provide a natural aesthetic look. They're great for daily use, especially for those who prefer a little bit of coverage. Multifunctional products are something that we're seeing more and more that have moisturizing properties, anti-aging properties, or even insect repellents. So these are things that you can certainly keep an eye out for as well. So finally, to wrap up, here are a few final tips. Number one, set a routine. Make applying sunscreen a daily habit, just like brushing your teeth. Apply it every morning, regardless of the weather or what your plans are for the day. Number two, layer your protection. Don't rely solely on the sunscreen. Use it as part of a broader sun protection strategy, including wearing that UV protective clothing, sunglasses, and seeking out shade when you can. Number 3, educate yourself. Stay informed about the latest research and recommendations about sun protection. And 4, encourage others. Share what you've learned about sunscreen with others if you want to share this podcast, and encourage others to look after their own skin with the appropriate tips that we've just talked about here in this podcast. And so there you have it, a comprehensive guide to sunscreens and sun protection. By understanding the types of UV protection, choosing the right sunscreens, applying it properly, you can enjoy the sun safely and confidently and prevent the risk of premature aging, cancer, burns, and all the other nasty stuff that can be associated with being in the sun for hours and hours on end without any protection. Thank you for tuning in again this week to the podcast. If you want to check out some of the resources, you can always check out my Instagram page where my handle is Dr. Teri Fisher, or you can check out my website, drterifisher.com. I look forward to speaking with you next week. Until then, stay safe in the sun, use your sunscreen, and I'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Anti-Aging Insights. Stay tuned to discover more of the latest news, treatments, technologies, and developments in non-surgical cosmetic and anti-aging medicine. For more inspiration, to access the show notes, or to book an appointment with Dr. Fisher, Dr. Frame, or any of the other anti-aging professionals, please visit our website at antiagingvancouver.com. Until next time, stay inspired and live life well.